citywide commissioner. I'm president of the Minneapolis Park Board, and I first of all want to thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to help us. This project is a kind of a new concept for us. It's a new direction for the Park Board and how we're doing things with the community, and that we are first involving as many people as possible in the design process. The best ideas, we believe, come from involving as many folks in the community, collaborating with the designers. So it's a different thing we're starting to do, and I would credit Bruce for this effort because he's our new planning director, and he's really pushed this different sort of concept, and we are wholeheartedly supportive of it. The other thing is it's pretty obvious that this park board is very interested in riverfront. We see the riverfront as a huge opportunity for growth in Minneapolis, not only economically, but also to provide more amenities for all of you. And lastly, we appreciate that the park board cannot do these things alone. So this is a first big endeavor that we're doing with the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, and Mary's going to talk a little bit more about that. But we realize that as we do these things, we are going to need partners. We cannot do all this alone by ourselves. Before I introduce Mary, I'm going to introduce there's one other elected official here that I know of, Scott Breland. Scott, can you raise your hand? Scott's on the park board, and Scott represents pretty much, it's a strange configuration here, but he has the outlet of the...
I'm from 3rd Avenue over this way.
Yes.
And he gets the parking lot on that side of the river. The rest is mine. I'm really happy that this meeting is happening. I am a junior park ranger. I have an official river rat certificate, so it's just really exciting to be here tonight.
Official river rat. I know Commissioner Bob Fine is going to be coming here. He's a citywide commissioner and former president of the board, and Anita Tabb is the commissioner who represents from Scott's area north. So she, I believe, is also going to try to come tonight. But all I'll tell you is that we are very, very excited to work on this. I think we all agree that this is a long, long overdue project, and it's about time we got around to fixing this piece up. And I really want to thank the Minneapolis Parks Foundation because it's their effort and their contribution of resources that really is making this possible. So with this, I'll introduce Mary DeLake.
Thank you, John. First of all, just following suit, I want to thank all of you for coming this evening. As John had alluded to, we are able to move forward as quickly and competently on this Waterworks project thanks to a private donation. This, as John said, is a partnership between the Minneapolis Parks Foundation and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. The Waterworks project this is phase 1 of what we're hoping will be many phases. The area that we are looking at, you've all got a diagram in your handouts, but basically we're looking at 3rd Avenue, the 3rd Avenue Bridge down to Portland, and then from 1st Street over to the river. And this area is an unbelievable area, as you all know, because it's a convergence of so many wonderful physical features that are representative of Minneapolis. First and foremost, that is a portion of the National Park Service. We are looking at one portion of a 72-mile national park. We have got the Lock and Dam, we've got the Stone Arch Bridge, we've got the St. Anthony Falls Laboratory right on the other side, we've got the falls, we've got the trails and parkway system, and then of course we have the Fuji-Ya site and the Mill City Museum, all coming together, all converging in one location. So needless to say, not only does this area have local interest, but it has national and international interest as well. The process for this phase, which is a feasibility study, is only going to be 3 months. This is the first kickoff meeting. The 3 months are sort of divided into 3 components. The first one is research, where the design team, which is made up of Meyer, Scherer Rockcastle, as well as HR&A advisors, they're going to be gathering information, all different sorts of information, social, economic, and environmental information. Phase 2, which is going to be sort of January, is where analysis is going to be taking place. Looking at all this information and trying to figure out what are those challenges and opportunities that sort of rise to the surface. And then last but not least is February, when that's going to be the synthesis time. Gathering all that information and all the analysis and putting it together and actually creating design team is going to be coming up with 3 or 4 different ideas that look at different types of programs, sort of what could be there. The second is design concepts, which illustrate what could be there. And then last but not least, sort of feasibility analysis. How much do these things cost? What is the feasibility of actually building these things, and where do potential partnerships lie and funding opportunities lie? This process was built on a process that took place in 2010. It was something called the Fuji-Ya Reuse Team. And that was a team of people who was convened by the Minneapolis Riverfront Partnership and the Minneapolis Parks Foundation. It was a group of civic leaders that were brought together. They met 3 or 4 or 5 times, and they came up with a variety of ideas of, once again, what could be with this area, and for lack of a better term, design guidelines, which Tom Meyer from Meyer Scherer Rockcastle will talk about in a moment. I really wanted to call out Cordelia Pearson and Edna Brasitis, because as heading up the Riverfront Partnership, because they really worked like dogs getting the word out about these events and really supporting moving forward on this, because as I said before, it all kind of came together rather fast and furiously, so thank you guys. We are really looking to you to work very closely with the designers, in the sense that you have a level of expertise and perspective about your community and your river, and the design team really needs to be informed about your thoughts and your expertise. So we are looking to you to help us, because the information you provide the designers will then go on and help them shape what could be in this area. We're also looking to you for advocacy, for support for this process and for going forward. So, having given you your charge, I'm going to pass this off now to Bruce Chamberlain, who's the Assistant Superintendent for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, because he's going to really put this project in the larger context of what Park and Rec is doing in the Central Riverfront. So thanks again.
Thanks, Mary. This is such an important project that it takes 3 people to do the preliminary introductions. This project is 22 years in the making. You may know that the Park and Recreation Board purchased the Fuji-Ya site in 1989 and used a portion of that site to build West River Parkway through the area, and then essentially kind of left unattended the remainder of the site. And it's time for us, can't quite hear me, it's time for us to begin looking at the future of this site. So it's pretty exciting for all of us to be incorporated and to be involved in thinking about the future of what we're calling the Waterworks study area. And I think it's important that we recognize that name and think about the former Fuji-Ya site as a component of the Waterworks study area, but it's not all of it. And the Waterworks study area, as Mary mentioned, goes beyond the former site itself. And this place and the landscape is actually the very first water plant that brought public municipal water to the city of Minneapolis. So it has a tremendous amount of history in the settlement of the city and the beginning and initiation of the city. So it seemed like a very apt name as we move forward with this place. I want to put it in context also of what we are doing as part of the Central Riverfront. Some of you may know that the City of Minneapolis, or the Park Board, manages regional parks as well as local neighborhood parks. And one of those regional parks is the Central Riverfront Regional Park. And we're going to be updating a 30-year-old master plan for the Central Riverfront Regional Park beginning in 2012. It's probably going to extend into 2013. But as part of that area, which Waterworks is part of, we'll be doing a series of design vignette studies of different really important components or areas of the Central Riverfront. And Waterworks is one of those. So in many ways, this is the kickoff to what we're going to be doing in a very community-engaged way, involving the community and looking at the entire Central Riverfront. So we had an earlier meeting with Tom and others involved in the design team to think about what kinds of things might we want to see on the Waterworks site, and going to be taking input from you as well. But it's what we found is that we're
we start to talk about this. And I think this is where the discussion is going to begin for us, is to think about the river as the center and our experience of the river on both sides. And this is a really important, critical piece of that, but it's not the only piece. And we understand that, we recognize that, and we want your input about what kinds of experiences you want to see on the riverfront. And it might not all be on the Waterworks, within the Waterworks study area, but it is part of the experience of the downtown Central Riverfront. So with that, I'm going to introduce Tom Meyer. Tom is the lead designer on this effort, and ask him to walk us through some analysis. Tom.
Thank you, Bruce, and Mary, and John. I just want to acknowledge Reese McPherson from our office, who's been working with me and one other colleague on this project, which has just been such a pleasure to work on in this exciting area. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. So here's the agenda. We'll be talking about the conditions of the area. We'll be talking about some challenges and opportunities. We'll talk about the Fuji-Ya building. Our consultant colleagues will talk about public uses, and then we'll have a time for questions and answers. So we're going to start with existing conditions of the area, and start by looking at the larger context. As Bruce was saying, in a sense, everything is kind of connected to everything on the riverfront. You can think of the Central Riverfront as one of three areas that have a distinct character. The gorge, of course, the lower gorge, as its name implies, has a certain kind of character carved out by the receding falls. The Central Riverfront characterized by the falls, and the upper river more the kind of prairie river. Along the Central Riverfront area and its immediate environment, there are some places, some areas that have a kind of a distinction along this lineal path. And starting with, on the top there, with the Scherer Brothers site, which was recently acquired by Parks, and recently gone through a planning process after an international design competition. You see a couple images here of what is been planned for happening there, a winter and a summer image. Essentially, it is a restoration of an island, Hall's Island, which occupied that space, and turning it into a swimming and skating and outdoor recreation facility. Just below it, as many of you know, is Boom Island, which is a picnic and gathering area for the community. Excuse me. Next down the line is Nicollet Island, which is, of course, the historic village and the event center. The Mills District across the river from us on this side, the East Side Mill District. So you see it on the top there. And here's another image from the upper riverfront above the Falls study, where the Scherer Brothers scheme emerged from. That shows an island, an idea about a kind of restoration of the memory of Spirit Island. Spirit Island was basically right in front of us here. It was removed in the 60s by the Army Corps of Engineers to make way for barge navigation. So that's another thought that is kind of associated with the East Side Milling District. The west side, where we are and where our project area is, and then a little further down, Bohemian Flats. So again, you can think of a sort of a series of rooms along the corridor of the river, and our job is to look at really half of one room, which is the east side milling district. And here it is in the darker line. You also have it in your handout. Again, it goes from Portland at the end of the Stone Arch Bridge on up to 3rd Avenue. But the oval, the shaded area, is a representation of how the influences of the broader area really bear on the area that's actually within the boundary. So we need to look beyond the immediate site. Again, you can think of the lineal nature of the river here as being maybe the biggest influence. And you see the circles here represent significant connection points. So the upper circle is the 3rd Avenue Bridge, where 1st Avenue intersects it, and it provides, at that point, a gateway. You see well, actually, the upper circle is actually Hennepin Avenue. It's the next one down with the arrow going through it. That's 3rd Avenue. Again, you see the outlines of the study area. You see this 3rd Avenue, or the Stone Arch Bridge coming across in the middle of the picture, and connecting with a future granary corridor which runs through the university area. So each circle is a kind of a connection either to a riverfront crossing or an important west side neighborhood street. Now there's a series of panorama shots which again describe the area. This one looking from the 3rd Avenue Bridge, looking basically, I would say, southeast and east. And you can notice that at least from this angle, a large part of the area is characterized by trees. This is a view from the roof of the Fuji-Ya building. And you get quite a panorama from up there at the Stone Arch and the top of the falls and the lock and dam and so on. Here's a view from the Stone Arch Bridge moving towards downtown. And in effect, when you get off the bridge moving in this direction, you are going right into the teeth of the study area. So in a way, the study area is the bridgehead for the Stone Arch Bridge. Looking from the other side of the river, and here I would just maybe point out that you can see that there are trees to the right, which is in our study area. And then off on the very far left, there are trees again over by the Guthrie. And the whole zone in between is the Mills District, where all of the historic mills have been. And many still are. And so now we're going to move to another section which looks at the history, some of the historical aspects. This is, again, looking from the other side of the river back at us over here. And this is before there were many mills or development on the downtown, what's now the downtown side. So you see it in its more or less natural condition, pre-development condition. A little bit later, you can see where the words in the upper left there, where the words West Mill District are. That's just about on top of the Fuji-Ya building. Somewhat later, in the 1880s, these two images, and this is probably the height of the physical development of the Mills District. It's kind of fascinating to see how there's really small town residential development all around this mill complex, which is the tallest and densest thing, really probably between Chicago and San Francisco or something. And then on the lower drawing, you can see the outlined area is the city waterworks site. There are actually two separate editions of that function on that very site. And that's why this project is called the Waterworks site. A little later still, we're looking at the canal. And the canal perhaps many of you know this, is the main source of water power for all of these mills. The canal entered on the water entered above the falls level and exited in the photo here just straight out from us here. So for about 2 blocks, this canal ran under what's now the street and powered mills on both sides of it. I'll just point out that a feature that we're going to be talking about is the gatehouse, which is this structure right here. So when water came in here into the canal, which ran down like that, this gate controlled the flow of that water. And again, the water power was really, in effect, the spine and source of power and energy for the Mills District. A little later still in time, here from the 60s, you can see that the Fuji-Ya Restaurant does not exist yet, and mills that occupy the site are gone, except for some low buildings. And you can also see, let me walk over here again, you can see the gatehouse here. And the canal came in like this, through the gatehouse, and then the canal continued on down. And of course, this is the Crown Mill, which still exists. In the 70s, it's now the Fuji-Ya Restaurant. Still a passenger train going by to the old depot on Hennepin. And in the aerial photo, you can see that the Fuji-Ya Restaurant is really, kind of in an island of empty space, except for the engine house, which of course still exists. And then this is from after 1991, because if you look carefully, you can see that this building is burned out as an empty shell. And the fire was in 1991 here. Fuji-Ya building is there. It's closed at this point. Reforestation of the site is starting to happen, or at least of the Fuji-Ya site. And here it is as it looks today. And again, I'll point out that you can see some remnants, kind of shadows on the ground of some remaining walls that indicate where the canal was. And the gatehouse was right in the middle of that parking lot that's out there at the end of the Stone Arch Bridge. So, what history is underground? Well, the gatehouse is still there. This is a shot from when it was being built, but it was before River Road went in. Archaeology was done, and it exists in an intact condition, essentially under the parking lot. You can see the wheels on the top, which were a mechanism to raise and lower these kind of guillotine sort of gates that control the flow of the water. And this is an overlay of archaeological remains over an existing photo. So just starting with the tall building, that's the Columbia Mill, which occupied the site. And the Fuji-Ya building is built on the foundations and first floors of that building. The Occidental Mill wall is the wall that if you go along River Road, you see that it's decaying. It's kind of holding back the parking lot behind it. You see that there. This wall, if you walk along or bike along River Road, that wall still exists, and it was the edge of the canal. And here you see piers of the canal, which again are underneath the earth at that point. And finally you see here the kind of outline of the gatehouse beyond. So that's all underground and essentially invisible. Here's a plan of it. And this is a drawing that shows how the canal functioned. Again, the gatehouse right here. Water came in. And that one photo that I showed you was water coming out of this thing. And every mill along the way took in water at the upper level. It dropped, turned turbines, and then shot out at the lower level. And all the red lines are places where archaeology has been done, where a trench has been dug, and remains have been documented and photographed and so on. There's also been a tree survey done on the portion that has trees. And down below you see some of those, not only the trees, but some of the remains. I'll just point out one other feature that maybe some of you aren't aware of, but under First Avenue, there is what was a former rail line that heads over towards the post office. So Mill Place is right over here. And it's at kind of a mid-level between River Road is down here, this is kind of in the middle, and that's up at First Street and 3rd Avenue bridge level. Now there's also a layer of thinking that's happened before this process has begun. The city, in its master planning, has done some thinking. The Park Board has, as well as the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board. So this is the Mills District Master Plan done by the City of Minneapolis. You see the Mills, you see the Stone Arch Bridge, the Mills District. And up above there is a blow-up of the plan that focuses on the site that is where Fuji-Ya building is. And I can't reach that high, but basically you'll see that the canal is shown there as being restored and the gatehouse restored. And the Fuji-Ya site is shown in part as remaining a parking lot. Another study that was done by the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board, here's our site area, the falls, Stone Arch Bridge. It identifies a couple of places here, which are the circular shapes represent the idea of a gateway, a place where you arrive into the district, where there might be information, or a place to gather or meet folks, that kind of thing. And there's a blow-up of that up above. Not a lot of detail in particular about our site, other than that it's an important gateway. When River Road was put in 1990 or so, the Park Board did this study, which is the earliest that I'm aware of showing the idea of opening up the entrance to the canal, restoring the gatehouse, and having at least some of the canal beyond that also restored. When the trains on the Stone Arch Bridge met the canal, there was a bridge, as you see here. And you may remember that from the photo I showed a little while ago as well. And so that also would be restored. So, now this is a section, as Mary said, there was a group of people who started meeting about 2 years ago. People who I think probably many of whom were concerned about the WAVE project that was being planned on the Fuji-Ya site, and were concerned about what's going to happen when the WAVE goes away. And so I was on that committee, and we, at the end of several meetings, kind of gathered some things that we called characteristics of the area. They weren't, they maybe had some design implications, but they were really not so much proposals yet. It's just kind of what was implied by the nature of the area. And so what we did for today was to kind of update them, because the area, the study area now is a little bigger than it was then. So what I'm going to show you is 5 characteristics that we thought and think are indicative of the area. And the first one, and again you see the study area in red, is that this is not a separate area. It is very much part of the west side milling district. And you can see the remains of all those mills, and that our particular study area is the upper river half of that study area. So we need to think about the whole thing, not just our half of it. The second characteristic is that there are entry points to this district, and the upper left circle is the 3rd Avenue Bridge, and it really constitutes an entry into the major milling district as well as to our study area. On the downriver side of that is the Guthrie Theater, and probably in effect the Endless Bridge projecting out over River Road is sort of a signal that you're entering into the riverfront milling district domain. And then in between there are those smaller circles which are other significant entry points. That is at this point, moving through this building and out the ruined courtyard, or here at Portland, or the upper circle there at the end of the Stone Arch Bridge, or this one where 1st Street and 5th Avenue come together at the Fuji-Ya building. Each of those constitutes an entry point. Another characteristic is that there are certain places that seem more natural for overlooking and viewing, and that those are identified by the circles. So from the edge of the 3rd Avenue Bridge, for instance, at the top, on the lower circle would be the top of this building, the observation deck, and then in between, I thought that perhaps that circle might be in the grove of trees that's next to the Fuji-Ya site, and maybe that other circle might be in effect where the building is, where the Fuji-Ya building is. And then the space in between that's toned, therefore might be a little more, let's say, more tranquil, more about gathering, more about some kind of function that might sit there, and but not be so much the singular act of observing and viewing. So it just sets up a bit of a pattern for how uses and design might emerge. The fourth characteristic is that this is a multi-level site. And I think this is a particularly significant one because the falls is, by its essential nature, is about being on 2 levels. So that's one of them, being above and below the falls. And if you think back to the first slide, the entire gorge, the lower part of the river, is shaped by being below the falls. And the entire upper river has got a very different character. So that's a very significant geological and historical event. Where it says park and city, this is the Fuji-Ya and the site going up the 3rd Avenue. There is the upper side, which is basically on the level of 1st Street. And then there's the lower side, which is effectively the level of River Road. So that grade is significant there for just to maneuver that grade if you want to walk it, but also there's 2 different characters and 2 different histories associated with it. And then finally, where the canal and gatehouse are, there's not only is the canal below grade, but even below the canal are those tail races that exit down here. So there's things above grade, like the existing mills, Crown Mill. There's the surface, which is the street. There's the bottom of the canal, which is down, and then there's another layer below that. So there's this multi-layered story. When we were working on the design of this building, we thought it was important that people would come in on the street, drop down to the ruined courtyard level and go out to the river. And if they went to the exhibits, they could move up the flower tower, get to the top, come down the glass elevator. So the whole functioning of all these mills was by gravity, where materials were constantly being taken to the top, working their way through machines, moving by gravity into boxcars and out to the market, just as the water was doing the same thing. The final characteristic is that if you look along the length of the study area and beyond, you can sort of identify little smaller scale areas that have certain characteristics in their physicality, or they're almost in their DNA. You know, so starting at the 3rd Avenue Bridge, there are 2 bridges: the bridge, 3rd Avenue Bridge, and then that railroad bridge that you saw earlier. You go a little further, and it's trees and ruins that kind of characterize the next slice. Then there is the Fuji-Ya building, and these 2 streets that come together and come very close to the river. And there's a zone that's about the canal and the bridgehead, which is underneath that parking lot. Then there's a zone that's about the 3rd Avenue, or the Portland Avenue axis, and the lock and dam at the end of that. Then the mills and mill ruins, and then finally the Guthrie and Chicago Avenue. So each of those areas suggests different possibilities for use, both public use and public and private partnerships, or recreational uses, and so on. One of the bigger challenges, but also interesting opportunities, is just how movement works here. That is, movement of cars, people, and bicycles. So the 3 colors are cars, people, and bicycles. And the circles represent places where there's really some significant activity, crossing of bikes and cars, for instance. Let's see, I think this next slide zeroes in on those 3 circles in the middle of the slide. And those circles are where 5th Avenue and 1st Street come together right by the Fuji-Ya. And you know that there's a little, what on a day like today is probably an icy ramp and steps that are narrow and get you down here. And you know that if you're on a bike, once you get down there, you want to cross the street, but there's no crosswalk. If you are at this point, you've come off the 3rd Avenue, you've come off the Stone Arch Bridge, and you hit the parking lot. It's not particularly clear where you go, but if you do go over that way, and you're competing with cars who are driving into the parking lot, and then the Portland Avenue intersection, which is better marked and more conventional, but it still probably feels a little bit more like an auto-dominated intersection rather than a pedestrian-oriented one. So all of these are sort of problems and conflicts in a sense, but it's also places where lots of human energy comes together. People on bikes and cars and walking are kind of meeting each other. And those are usually places where, if they're designed right, people like to be. They like there's plenty of places for solitude and so on. They like as people to come together. So we're looking at both solving the problem, but also taking advantage of the intersections of people with each other that happens in these places. So now we're going to take a little look at the Fuji-Ya building itself. This is a shot from when it was still a restaurant, and maybe many of you remember that. The little tatami mats there on the right, with individual rooms, the glass on the lower left overlooking the river. This is what it looks like today. There's a hole in the roof. Windows are boarded up and the boards are falling off. Lower left there, you see the walls of the Columbia Mill are really quite decayed, and they're not going to last too much longer. The inside, summer of 2010, we walked through, spent a day in the building with a structural engineer, and you can see in the lower image here, we're in the sub-basement, which is actually part of the original mill. A floor has collapsed, going down into, I think, where the turbine may have been originally, or some machinery. paint is peeling. The building, structurally is probably not going to fall down, but is not in very good shape. It's also built on 6 different levels. So for a small building to be built on so many levels, it makes it very difficult to project public use of any sort, acknowledging that there needs to be handicap access to all levels. And here's a diagram where the darker lines show the existing mill structure, and the lighter piece is what was added in 1968 when the building was built. So it's literally built on the foundations and ruins of the mill. I'm going to turn it over now to Candace Damon, who will speak about how uses might be determined for the site.
Thanks, Tom. Hopefully that works. It's very nice to be back here and to see a variety of familiar faces from previous times. We've had the honor to work here in Minneapolis, and thrilled to be working with Tom's firm for the first time. So I thought I'd start a little bit about how we hope this collaboration between our firm and Tom's firm and all of you will work. It is Tom's and my intent tonight to inspire you to tell us what you hope this site can become. I'm sure that the reason you're here is because you have ideas about what the site can be. You've probably thought about it for years. Tom and I are suggesting that by showing you what the site has been, Tom's presentation of 150 years of history on this site, by reflecting on what many of you, I'm sure, and your predecessors have thought about in terms of what this site could be after the restaurant closed, which Tom also shared with you. And then by looking at some examples of what other communities around this country and in other parts of the world have done in similar situations that we can get you talking tonight. Nope. I think it's next. Okay. Well, I need to bring it up. So, by virtue of you having told us what you hope for this site, then Tom and I can go back to our respective offices and do the research necessary to try and figure out the extent to which those aspirations are possible to realize by virtue of the physical nature of the site, programming realities, and what is possible financially. And then come back to you and talk to you about what we think it could be. Now, of course, when Tom shows you what could be, he will show you pictures, more maps and diagrams and renderings of the sort that he showed you tonight. I will show you numbers. I will show you numbers and dollar figures and charts and graphs, because our charge has been to think through how this might get funded, both the capital investment that's required to make it real and the kinds of operating revenue structures that what you might think about putting in place to make sure that the park is maintained appropriately moving forward. I think it's appropriate to talk about money at this early stage, really for 3 reasons. As you are all doubtless aware, after more than a generation of parks departments across the country, and although you've held the line better than just about any other city in the country, the public sector resources here are diminishing as well for parks. It's increasingly clear that the kinds of really heavily utilized, vital, lively parks, the places that you aspire for this site, increasingly rely on new sources of funds, and the tax revenues are inadequate to maintain them to the standard that we all want to see them maintained. Second, virtually by definition, I think, a park that is capable of generating operating revenue above and beyond what tax collections are is a park that's loved. Whether it's a park that generates it through philanthropy, or through corporate sponsorships, or through earned income, or because it creates real estate value around it, and you can tap into that real estate value. If people are permitting excess revenue to go to the park, it's a park that's loved and used and lively, and that's what you want. And then I think finally, related to those first 2, there's very much a synergy between the kind of park you get and where the operating revenue comes from. So So there are parks, and I'm going to show you some in a minute, that are clearly designed with the notion that wealthy individuals or corporations will help support them. They are in some way, shape, or form monuments to the egos of particular individuals or companies. Those are parks that are frequently in the core of commercial districts in cities. There are parks that create value around them, usually in residential neighborhoods that are emerging, and those parks can tap into that increment of value. And then there are parks usually in places that are served by great transit and car access that get packed with all kinds of earned income generating opportunities. Those are parks that communities struggle with. What's the difference between public and private, and when do I know that I have a park as opposed to a retail development? But those kinds of tensions are the ones I think that you're going to want to be talking about as you think about the uses of these sites that are more than just purely park. So I'm going to show you some examples of how people have been thinking about these questions in other places, and then Tom and I are very interested in hearing what you have to say, how you think about what could be here. So, I'm a New Yorker. I'm going to start with a picture of what's probably the classic downtown public-private collaboration in a very successful park in this country. This is Bryant Park. It's a restaurant. It's got a number of restaurant concessions in it. It's a, by and large, really well-managed boundary between the public park and private concessions that substantially support the operations of the park. There certainly have been some tensions about whether private interests are allowed to take over the park too often, but by and large, there's this lovely dynamic that works very, very well between private interests and public park, such that the park feels very public while it has earned income operating, generating activities that help pay for it, as well as these kinds of purely public activities that make it lively and fun. This is the High Line. This is one of our projects. This is the former elevated rail track that's been converted into a park that's enormously popular both with New Yorkers and with tourists. This is a place in it that's incredibly popular because it's a place to pause on a long linear walk, to hang out with kids, and to look out over the street. This is also the High Line. This is the experience of strolling down the High Line. This is a park in St. Louis, recently refurbished, and one of the set of new parks in this country where sculpture and flowers and beauty are used to create spaces where people want to gather. Parks, this is the same park, that in many cases are also recognizing they're part of a 21st century landscape and integrating new kinds of technology into the experience of being in the park. Other cities around the country are recognizing that the new parks need to recognize the fact that families are returning to cities. More and more parks, including in downtown areas, are thinking about how you welcome kids, a discussion that doesn't always go smoothly in every place. I'm currently working in San Diego, where the elected official body is pretty much said as a matter of policy that kids don't belong downtown, they're not going to play around in downtown parks. Other cities have made a different decision. This is the David Rockwell prototype playground. It's just been opened in Lower Manhattan and is proposed to be brought to other cities around the country. This is Pier 6 in Brooklyn Bridge Park. This is my neighborhood park. Another approach to thinking through how the new parks gets programmed is the notion of green gardens into the parks. This is Millennium Park in Chicago, and I think what's noteworthy about this is not just that this is a beautiful summertime garden, but it functions very well as a wintertime landscape too, with the winter grasses making for a really elegant experience. And one that I think you're going to have to grapple with here, clearly, the notion of it being a four-season city and what do you do in the winter. This is Longwood Gardens in the Philadelphia-Wilmington area, so also a place where a garden has to confront the question of what's a four-season place. This is obviously spring, but Longwood Gardens, the most heavily visited time of the year is around Christmas, when it becomes very much about a greenhouse experience. And of course, today, and I think based on some of what Tom showed you, we started to talk about the excitement of potentially getting underground and exploring the ruins and the archaeological record of this site. This is a tunnel that never got programmed, but is actively visited and exciting right under a major retail thoroughfare in my neighborhood, in which people just enjoy visiting and exploring, but as I said, never got programmed. An alternative is this depot under the Williamsburg Bridge in Manhattan, which we've just been retained to help a community group think through how it might become the low line. So, and it's a very, very cool idea for how to get a program that we started to think evokes what could happen in the study area that we're considering. Another one of your colleagues this morning who was working with us pointed out that we were showing a variety of ideas that touch the water or on the water, but weren't actually in the water. This is the Whitewater Rafting Center in the suburbs of Charlotte. This is the view from the Terrace Wine Bar. So you can sit and watch Olympic quality whitewater athletes practicing while having a glass of wine. And finally, near and dear to Denny's and Meyer, although Tom is a bit skeptical, this is the response of some other folks in northern climates to how you create a four-season site. There's a series of bats from around the world that get people down to the riverfront at all times of the year, and another way of experiencing this being a water site. This is Copenhagen. Copenhagen again, Iceland in the winter. This is a site that it's essentially a very high-end spa, accessible to everybody at every price point because they've developed a line of bath products that supports the spa. This is northern Italy, and in some ways I think evocative of your site. This is the United States, Steamboat Springs, really in the winter. This is the proposed new baths on the Seattle waterfront. This is a design by Jim Corner that's gotten tons of folks in Seattle really, really excited about the potential for Puget Sound. And here are some of the local precedents for similar kinds of ideas, being in the water above the falls, and some of the projects that Tom's firm has done. So, as I said, we now want to hear what you have to say, and hope that by showing you history, what you all have done in the past, and what some other communities are thinking about, that you can now tell us what you think.
I was just having a surreal conversation with the former owner of the Fuji-Ya. Really, very interesting. Is this on? Yes. Okay, so could we up the lights a bit? What we want to do really more than anything is have a dialogue with you to kick off this effort, kick off this design process. And I should have mentioned when I started that the intent of this process isn't to come to the solution for the Waterworks study area. It's more than anything to explore options, to explore the broadest range of possibilities that we can, put them all up on the wall, and test them for feasibility, for market feasibility, financial feasibility, for the way the community would use them and the way the community would critique those ideas and what seems to rise to the top in the sense or from the community. So what we want to do this evening is really have a dialogue with you about what you see and the kinds of things that you want us to think about as we begin this journey of looking at the Waterworks study area. So there were 4 questions, and many of you probably picked this up as you were coming in. I'm just going to read these off real quickly. And then I'm going to just really hand around the microphone and ask you to talk about how you would respond to some of these questions, to give us your comments, whatever it is that's on your mind regarding this project. But I'm going to read through the questions real quick. What type of park would you like to see on the Waterworks, in the Waterworks study area? What is it, and if we think about park in the broadest sense, what kinds of uses, what kinds of attractions, and maybe what kinds of park you want to see within this area? Second one, what are those qualities of the existing site that we could build on? Important physical features, geological conditions, historic components, whatever they are, the things that you think we ought to be building from as we think about this area. Third one, who would this place serve? Is this for local residents? Is it for visitors? Who primarily or in total would this serve? And finally, what could the mix of indoor and outdoor spaces and programs, particularly in response to our four-season climate? Let me read that again. What could be the mix of indoor and outdoor spaces and programs that respond to our four-season climate? So how do we think about this as a four-season space? What kinds of things should we be thinking about from a program standpoint, from a design standpoint, as we start to think about this property? So with that, I'm going to, one second. I need to introduce Andrew Caddock. Andrew is our newest project manager at the Park Board. And Candace talked about the High Line. Andrew worked on the High Line. He just moved here from New York. So it's exciting to have him here and involved in this project. And Tom is going to, I think, be described on this side. Andrew's going to be described on this side. Jot down your notes as you talk. No?
Yeah, it's interesting that recently, well, I'm going to go right to question number 2, because do we have a picture of the Fuji-Ya site in relation to the river? There, that'll kind of work. Okay. Mill rooms. Okay, now where are the falls from here?
Falls are right.
Okay. So the Fuji-Ya site is down here then? Oh. Okay. One of the things, this will overlook the falls. And recently I was talking with the people that are behind me. I'm a founding member of the BRC, which is the Bedoti Reconciliation Consortium. We're looking to identify our cultural and spiritual sites in the river area here for the forthcoming presence of us again, because it's illegal for us to be here. Anyhow, I found out just recently that we have a spirit that lives under the falls. So I thought it would be rather interesting that since this site overlooks the falls, that we incorporate the spirit's name into the site and then include a Dakota Interpretive Center there, which I'm envisioning could have a little patio that we could have a teepee on, since we wouldn't be on the ground floor. But again, we're in the process of formulating an MOA to give to the Park Board so that we can work with the Park Board in identifying, maintaining, and protecting our sacred and spiritual sites in the river area. We're already on board with the St. Paul Parks, so now we're looking to get here. And we do have some sites here, and we'll have more sites as the group formulates the MOA and we do our research. And like I say, I was telling President Irwin, I'm the urban member. Everybody that's behind me is west. I have all of the elders and all of the spiritual leaders of the entire Dakota Nation. They're the ones that formulate the information, give it to me, and then I pass it on to you. So like I said, I only recently found out that we have a spirit under the falls.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a few comments. My name is Franklin Holm, and I've been an old engineer and flower miller all my life, and I've been in the greater Minneapolis area most of my 80-plus years. And I was around when this was a viable operation, industrial operation. We had 22 mills between 3rd Avenue Bridge down to the 10th Avenue Bridge. All that water power was used to power the mills. That was before electricity. The mills used lanterns and lights to go around the mill. That was a little before my time, of course. We had electricity. But I worked for a PV company, and we had a mill down here in the falls, one water turbine. And of course, residential mills had a number of them. The old Washburn mill had probably over half a dozen. But anyway, I think I want to present something to you people that we should probably at least consider, and that is water power development for electricity. We have two generating stations on the east bank over there, part of which is shown in the photo there. The thing is, we have a unique opportunity here. Not many cities have a source of power that is represented by St. Anthony Falls. And I want to bring that to your attention that there's a lot of cubic feet of water that go over that falls every day. I'm a volunteer here in the mill, but I'm speaking as a private citizen now. And certainly, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that there is a possibility to coexist with power generation and park development. This is my point. It can be done very effectively. In hydro generation, a single-story low-profile building, most of the mechanism is below grade, so you don't see it. But here is an opportunity for the city to also have a good source of income. I don't promote the idea that cities should get into the power generation work, but they could have a long-term lease, turn it over to a private corporation for building and development, and we'll have a nice income, I feel. When we closed down our mill back in 1962, I negotiated a little contract with NSP in those days for selling our water rights. And of course, we don't know how many water rights are represented by the existing companies that are still there. I just want to also point out that there was an article in the paper yesterday. Most of our power generation for the upper Midwest is coal-fired generated. And in the year 2012, there are going to be very strict emission standards enforced. And a lot of the old 50-year-old coal-fired plants are going to be obsolete or face major renovation. Some of the plants will be converted to gas. And I just wanted to, I just wanted to say that there is an opportunity that we don't want to overlook. I know the idea is not new, but I think this is an opportunity at this particular time that we should look out. Water generation is very eco-friendly and doesn't pollute or anything like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Others? Questions, thoughts? Yes?
I want to echo what Malcolm said. I think that we have an opportunity to recognize all of the history that's happened, and not just from the time the city started or the mill started, because it's the river. I mean, that's the main thing. I'd really like us to focus on the geology, have it be somewhat educational, but a friendly place for, I guess I envision it for everybody, whether it's a visitor. I'm a resident here, but I also think the beauty of the river sometimes gets lost, and so I just want to have the emphasis there.
Don't be shy.
I'm not shy. I've been talking to lots of folks, and again, this is a great site, and I think it's really exciting here tonight to look at not just rehabbing a building. So a lot of the folks that I've talked to have talked about what we could do with the building. The Power of the Falls, the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board plan really lays out the vision of the whole Central Riverfront being just a piece, only partly done. And again, how this all works together and makes this, for me, an international destination that folks could spend days at. So they're not just going one day to see a museum, but there are many attractions. The restoration of the waterfall on the other side of the river, Father Hennepin Park. certainly, I've been working with some Dakota folks about the possibility of we talked about a Native American restaurant at that location. Certainly the sacred sites is a very interesting and important piece of what should happen at Central Riverfront. Medote Memories, this museum has been part of talking about sacred sites and making connections. There's folks that have sent me emails about this being an homage to a Japanese restaurant. For me, one of the most exciting things would be to work with my partners at the National Park Service. This is a national park. And again, people come from miles away to come to national parks, but this is probably the least well-known national park because it's an overlay. And I always thought that, working with the National Park Service, that this might be the gateway, this might be the entrance where folks would know that they're in a national park. Maybe a little bit like the Science Museum where there's an interpretive center. But to have the heart of Minneapolis be also identified as a national park, I thought would be just a great opportunity. And again, how do you enter all these pieces and parts of important history? This could be the gateway and a great opportunity.
This is a wonderful opportunity.
And as we're looking to the future, I'm also a little bit concerned about the present. There are a lot of citizens who are living around this area. As I looked at the Reuse Park Board team so far, there's one citizen on it and many other profit and nonprofit organizations. So I'm hoping that for, besides Fuji-Ya, there's a building behind with over 400 units that are there. And on each side of the Fuji-Ya, there's several units as well. So that we don't forget the people that are there as well as invite those that we'd like to see come down in the future. One other question I had was about the post office. I understood recently that there is empty kiosk, if you want to call it, underneath the post office that never got developed for, business or, little stores or whatever. And I know that the post office is always looking to get more revenue. And I wondered if there's any thought of putting the post office into this park system, because it's only a block or two away and there already is a huge existing building and possible commercial site right there.
John, are we talking about that?
A couple of points to your questions. One is that there really is no group that's established for this effort. This is a completely public. I think what you might be looking at is the reuse team. And that was a team that was established, maybe a year ago, a year and a half ago or something, that kind of met over a period of time. There's even more. But that's not part of this effort. So this really is this is an effort that is community-wide. So all of you are participating equally, essentially, in the effort that is underway right now as part of this process. And then the issue with the post office, there's this huge cavernous space underneath much of the post office, especially the area that was expanded back in about 1990, I think was the date. And there's also an arcade that was built along West River Parkway that obviously has gone unused and feels like a huge opportunity. If anyone can find a market potential for that, I think it'd be
really great. It's a little bit daunting, but it's really tremendous. Where do you go?
Hello, Mike. I'm a resident of the River West building, and I just wanted to comment on the post office. There's a lot of trucks that go from Fifth Avenue to First Street, and whatever the site becomes, I think we need to respect the sort of mixed use. A lot of these ideas are focused on nature, people, bikes, and the balancing the needs for the post office and the trucks and the automotive traffic, I think needs to be another factor that's brought up here, because the trucks are very loud. They sometimes accelerate quite aggressively up the road, so it should be, I just want to bring that up.
Thank you. I'm going to
Cordelia Kirsten, I'm Executive Director of the Minneapolis Riverfront Partnership, and it's really exciting to see so strong interest and to be able to listen to you all. You all came to us 2 years ago and said, we want our voices to be heard. The reuse team was more of a technical team than it was a citizen team to identify what some of the regulatory issues were, because the Park Board was resolving a lawsuit. So we couldn't have something public until the lawsuit was done, and we're very thankful to Minneapolis Parks Foundation, working with the Park Board, and our support to get this done. So thank you all for coming. So don't feel left out. It was just a preliminary thing. What I wanted to highlight, though, was what Scott said about this being a hub. When I talked to our regional partners and state partners about the Mississippi River and the Mississippi River Trail and the Great River Road, they emphasize over and over again, yeah, you've got the river and the storage bridge is great, but what do people do after they walk on the bridge? And is there a place for little kids to play? And where do I use the bathroom? So those are some of the mundane things, but some of the phenomenal things about the site. How many of you have been inside any of those tunnels? Okay. How many of you would easily forget, so it's just Scott and me, I guess, you would not soon forget that experience. It is transformational to look underneath, just as Frank was saying, look at those tunnels, what it took to build them and maintain them. The stonework is phenomenal. And I saw actually a story in the New York Times about people showing movies in the tunnels in Brooklyn. So I don't know about Candy about yours not being used, but it's amazing the programming opportunities down there. So that would be exceptional. There's no other city in Minnesota that has tunnels, I hope, I know, on the Mississippi River. That would make it a special destination. Another is the gatehouse. If that's intact, what a phenomenal resource that would be. So the tunnels, the gatehouse, and the Waterworks name. At first I was surprised by the Minneapolis Parks Foundation choosing that because we have a Minneapolis Waterworks. But what John Anspenson from the National Park Service said this morning was, that was the first municipal water supply. When people stopped being able to use wells and they weren't catching enough in their cisterns, the city built a waterworks. But what happened? They were taking water from the river and people got really sick. And they got sick for decades and they died. And finally, the waterworks was moved upstream. We care about our water. Water is in all of us. The Mississippi River is ultimately a story about our relationship with water. What a great interpretive story to tell. And if you guys hadn't chosen the word waterworks for this project, we probably would have all missed that. We would have focused on the gatehouse or the tunnels. But the water story here is a critical one for our city and our region. The falls, that would be something to provide better access to too. So the falls, water quality, gatehouse, and the tunnels would all contribute to this being a hub where you can get a sandwich and use a restroom, but that you have these exceptional features.
Everything that's being said is all makes good sense, and I'm no architect, and I can't deal mentally with some of the big vision things we're going to need. But I guess I would like to endorse this, what I heard anyway, which is this is going to be an area that's part of an urban setting. I think it therefore needs to be not sort of a part apart from the city, but better connected to it. It's going to have multiple openings, multiple access points, and is going to be available for daily use by people who live downtown or work downtown, as well as the destination kinds of things, the tunnels and so forth. I mean, we've got a lot of access problems, it seems to me. Off of the 3rd Avenue Bridge, you can't get down to the riverfront from the west side. There's no signage. I've had to help a number of people, from out of town trying to find the river, and they can't find it downtown because there's no, clear signage to get you down there. Just some basic stuff that would make the place open and accessible, and it really does need to have restrooms and a place to grab a cup of something or a sandwich. I think there's some fascinating things that could be done, and I hope we get the money and the technical expertise eventually to do them, like the tunnels or the gatehouse. But I think the first need is to make the waterfront better connected with the downtown, especially on the West River side, where more of the housing is, but there's more going on the East River side too. And just some basics and retaining it as an urban reality, not something that's going to be isolated because, it's really neat and there's all the wonderful, values of, the Father Mississippi, which I buy, but it's still going to be right there in the middle of an urban establishment, and I think to me that's got to be a priority.
Thank you. Welcome back to you, so I gave everyone a chance. You guys had a chance.
First, I want to thank John and Scott and Bruce for recognizing the importance of the public processes. To see it come back to Minneapolis is great. Thank you. Bruce, thank you very much. 3 comments I have. I could agree more with Cordelia. You know, the whole historical site, I have an opportunity to see those tunnels, and having access and programming those, I think, is an incredible opportunity. The second is access to water. I don't know how you're going to do that. I've walked across the bridge for 5 years, and I know at one time they had whitewater rafting. I think there's still like a course, and I don't know whatever happened to that, but kayaking, to see that something like that happen, but getting access onto the water, I think is critical as well. And lastly, public-private food concessions. Having attended sea salt and tinned fish tens of times, something to get the public-private food concession down in that area, it's just so desperately needed. We're ecstatic about Izzy's coming in 8 blocks away, but something else in the public-private food concession is just critical down in that area. Thank you again.
Thanks, Bruce. Jeanette, do you have anyone else? Actually, I'd like to give anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Oh, John.
I just want to get a reaction to what this gentleman just said. You know, if you saw the pictures that were being shown, all these other places, they celebrate that they're on the water. We've turned our back on them. And I like historical stuff, and I like to go to ruins, but I go to ruins maybe once or twice, and then not many times my kids want to go to the ruins again. But what about food? What about music? What about things that make it a vibrant riverfront that attract everyone to this area, and they want to come back again and again and again because it's just a phenomenal place that celebrates being on the water. What do you, I heard one mention of a concession. What do you think about amenities or things that you're going to want to come down to over and over again?
I want to ask you a question, though, John, and I'd like to hear you guys too. I agree with you that a whole bunch of ruins sitting there is ruins. I don't know, but can you imagine programming the ruins as restaurants and bars and climbing walls and playgrounds and making them more than just ruins?
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's great to think about that. But I want to know what they think.
Well, I'd also just like to say I'm Katie, and I'm in the River West building right behind Fuji-Ya. So, one, I would like to see sort of that upper area definitely, well, I'd like to see Fuji-Ya gone, basically. It's not very attractive from, looking down on it. And I think, just echoing kind of what the gentleman was saying, between the sort of urban transition to sort of like the park area, and I think there's huge opportunity to sort of maybe, with that grade change, really represent the city on the upper level, and then use the lower level for more of the activation for when people are coming off of that bridge. And of course, connecting the two would be critical. I know there's a nice ride stand on the street beyond Second, I think, that I think can maybe be incorporated in this area. And I really love the idea of the food vendors. I mean, we've got, the food truck and gourmet food truck is really popular. I don't know about this arcade, if there's some way, I've seen great precedents of sort of arcades that are activated like that. So I think really, maybe keeping it more urban for the people who are sort of using it on a daily basis and making that transition activation down in the lower level would be really interesting. And again, I also want to talk about the High Line. I also think that is a really great precedent in New York, the way they kind of weave that urban and nature together.
Hi, my name is Scherer Rockcastle. I'm from the Northwood Neighborhood Association, and I'd like to say that I think a lot of the ideas today should be integrated into the plan, but I really also, at the core of it, not only want to look at the history of Minneapolis from the Mill District, but earlier than that, the Dakota, possibly a Dakota Interpretive Center, and possibly that type of commercial food vending or partnership for food vending, because I think that would bring something to this as a destination that isn't brought to a lot of places. I mean, this would be a very unique purpose for that. In addition, we need to activate this riverfront. The St. Anthony side is highly activated. There's always things going on, and there's commercial concerns that add to that, and it seems like the West River side isn't as activated, and I'd like to see that happen.
Got Chuck here with the mic.
Chuck Sullivan. I don't know that I have any new ideas, but I've been doing things river for a long part of my life, and I do hear a lot of things that have been discussed over the years in many areas, and I think so this is not one isolated site. It is part of the whole of the river plan, both the central and the upper river, particularly, but the gorge also. It's a small site, and some of these things can't be done just on this site. So I think, and I have great respect for the team that's doing this, so I know that will be part of this. So I think context is important. The two things that I that weren't discussed is if, as now was discussed yesterday on the TV about the car coming upstream, closing the locks again, it shows there was no mention of the locks. That issue remains. How will that affect any of this? And then lastly, the post office site. This discussion is not the first time it's been made. Many efforts were made to get the post office to loosen up their hold on that space. It was originally designed for this, but the downtown council, the chamber, a lot of people have tried to loosen this up. Kudos to whoever can get it done, because it's the GSA or whoever runs the postal buildings have never been real forthcoming with that answer.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Bob Schmitz, and I'm a resident of the North Loop. And I've been in the North Loop since 2003. I have a wonderful solo canoe and rowing boats. Since 2003, moving here from South Minneapolis and having had lots of enjoyable time on Lake Harriet, I immediately got on the water and have access to the water within a block of where I live. Not an easy access, but one which I decided to use. Over time, after being out there for many years, noting that nobody's out there on the water, I decided to test a little program called Above the Falls Sports. What we do is we sell, we rent, we store boats, and we provide boat handling skill in paddling and rowing in the Mississippi, and as well as guided tours. We'd love to be close to the river. We haven't been able to do that at this point in time. We're about 3 blocks. We're just around the Monte Carlo restaurant, and we make a negative into a positive. We're Minnesotans, so we portage our boats to the river.
How many miles?
We have it's about a 3.5 block roll, and I've been really interested in trying to get together with the park board to make sure that what we're doing is what the park board thinks is okay. Right now, we access the river at Bassett Creek. We have a beach down there, and it's fabulous access. We also access, we enjoy going in front of the Federal Reserve Building, talking about the history of our city. We've got 5 plinths down there on which are located 5 separate moments of development in the city that we can talk about with all the visitors that we are able to get to come out with us. And then we proceed and we get on the river. Today we've been able to go through the locks. The locks have been one of our most popular trips. We get to get down below the falls. We have a wonderful panoramic view back up to the falls. We get to talk about the Guthrie and the Mill City Museum and all the wonderful things that are in the Mill District from the level of the water. It's a really great opportunity. We talk a lot about what we want to do around that body of water, but really to get on that water is really key. And I know from some people's perspectives it's a very dangerous place. What we're in business to do is to provide a safe and enjoyable opportunity for people to be on the river. And within the last, we started up in August of 2009. We operated 2 full seasons, 2010, 2011. It's not an easy row to hoe. It's very expensive to create awareness, but we're making progress, and it is fabulous. Now, one thing that we've would really like to see, I'm sorry, but I forgot the woman's name from New York, but she pointed out the water park down in, what was it, North Carolina?
Yes.
There's also a national destination now in Wausau, Wisconsin, where they hold the National Whitewater Championships. It's created a huge economic boom for the city. It is a place, who would ever think to go to Wausau? Well, it's been great. We also believe that if given the opportunity, we could create a facility down below the falls that would be safe and actually use that water as a recreational area down below the falls where you do have some whitewater activity. And we also would be interested in somehow assisting in the development or promoting the development of that whitewater park that was being considered several years ago, which was significant expense, and as we all know, it's not easy to come up with money, but we, in our little way, have been trying to develop a small sense of it is accessible. We are able to get on that river. The Waterworks facility could also facilitate that one way or another. Specifically, they could have wonderful viewing of water activity. Anyway, I've gone on, I apologize. But I am very enthusiastic about the river. It is an absolutely wonderful asset. I'm sorry that we have jumped the gun. We just want to get on the river. And it sounds like it's going to take a number of years. And so we've just basically decided to try and share the river.
Thanks very much. I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that the park board thinks that what you're doing is not only okay, but is really, really great.
Thanks.
Very cool. Others?
There's an exhibit here that, right here in the museum, that you can play with, and you can make the water do what the water did for the mills. If you could walk in that, it wouldn't be a science exhibit anymore. So the tunnels, the ruins, what we can do with that, both to show what it traditionally did and what we can do in them now, I think is fabulous. There was also a play at the Guthrie, and it was specifically commissioned for Minneapolis, and it talked about, it was vignettes of all of the different people, some of the names you knew, Kramarczyk, et cetera, and how they came here, how they lived here, how they walked to work, and all of that kind of thing. And it makes me think of all the cultures who started here, but all the cultures and languages I see on the bridge, and that kind of art outside here in this area that we're talking about. Would just be one of the kinds of things I think that could be done. But I think that and I think that if you walk around those kinds of ruins, and after seeing that exhibit here, there's more of a connection from the mills to the river. But you really, I agree, you don't really see a river until you get to be on the river. And one of the things I've noticed in other countries that I've been to and that I'm going to is that there's an opportunity very often to jump in a boat that has cultural significance, and you get to be one of the 10 or 20 Maori rowers or paddlers, or I haven't seen anybody do Leif Erikson's yet, but that kind of thing. So there's so many different ways of connecting things that have already got their roots in these buildings and these places. And I think it's not just ruins anymore. I think people will come back from that.
I would like to be an advocate for the arts. I think a world-class sculpture park would be a great idea. Millennium Park in Chicago draws thousands of people daily down to see the art. And when I was a kid, I used to come downtown. The old Fred Reserve used to have about 6 sculptures. And I used to visit it every time I come downtown, and I really miss that. And I like the idea of incorporating the waterway, but on the upper level, I think it would would be a great cultural experience to expose people to sculpture.
Well, I wanted to expand on what Scott was talking about, but first I wanted to say something about a native restaurant in the building there. We have 4 populations of natives in Minnesota. 2 of them are evicted. Not only my people, but the Winnebagos. That's why they're not part of Nebraska, part of Wisconsin. So we have a varied cuisine because, it's kind of like Europe. Not everybody eats the same food over there. They have their own traditional food. We have our own traditional food. My band of Indians were the only one of the 8 of the Dakotas that actually harvested and ate wild rice because everybody else was out in the plains. Anyway, going on with Scott, I've been in dialogue with the National Park Service. What they would like to do is have like a little bunkhouse as part of this building, and then on the east end, store canoes vertically so that they can tie the falls area into canoeing down to Fort Snelling, where they're going to have the Army Corps of Engineers hollow out a little harbor so that they can beach the canoes down there. And they're rehabbing 2 buildings at Fort Snelling, and they would also like to have a mini interpretive center, a mini Dakota interpretive center there also. So this is incorporating on-hand stuff there too.
I just wanted to add one more voice in favor of ruins. They're pretty cool. My name is Doug Mack. I serve on the board of Preserve Minneapolis, although I'm speaking on my own behalf, of course. But I also spent the summer serving as a tour guide on the riverfront, so I think I have a pretty good idea of what really resonates with people, so people from the Twin Cities and tourists from around the world. And when I did the tours of the riverfront, I noticed that the things that people got most excited about were Nicollet Island, the little village there, and the mill ruins. Because they're all great stories, it's a great visual, it's something that people really enjoy, and it's something that's really unique in a way that the river has, of course, but it's something that people don't expect. Everyone knows that there's the Mississippi River here, but no one really knows that there are these stories, and there's this thing that resonates here. I really want to emphasize that the ruins have a place, and they should be celebrated, and they should be an important part of this project. Minneapolis has a history of not always appreciating its history, often knocking down some of the major landmarks in history. And I think that that's a shame. I think it's time that we change that. And this is a great opportunity to embrace our history, embrace those remnants of our past and of our stories, and celebrate the ruins.
I'd like to make a comment. I would like to ask, how many have been through the Mill Museum here? How many have not been through it? You should make it number 1 on your list. In fact, during the week, we have from 1 to 5 bus loads of school children a day here at the museum. And it's a wonderful attraction. We have a lot of people off the street that come. It's one of the number 1 attractions on the Twin Cities, I know.
I'd like to ask, has there been any long-term study about the lock-in dam and whether that's going to stay in use?
It's probably a long conversation. The current discussion is around Asian carp, and there is discussion. I'm not sure how serious or how imminent, but there is discussion about the possibility of closing the locks in this area in order to control Asian carp. There are probably others in the room who have more information on that, but it's an interesting topic that's been taken up by the City Council recently.
It takes an act of Congress, so it would have to be something that would be motivating enough to do that.
Governor Davis having a meeting on Tuesday with stakeholders about it, so it's receiving national and state level leadership attention.
Okay, I also wanted to say that there's absolutely no draw to this area in the wintertime when it's cold out. And through most of the area that we're talking about here, it seems to me that we walk through it, we drive through it, we bike through it, but there's really no opportunity to really stop, and there's no view of the river, cut off of the river. So it'd be great to see this get used somehow.
That is our signature line.
Mike Redder. One thing I would like to comment on is, if possible, try to maintain as many mature trees on that site as possible. I think that would be significant to try to work that provide around the existing, at least church infrastructure. So I'm 100% in agreement that more amenities need to be developed in the States. We need a building of some sort, with probably multiple functions occurring within it. I do think that one of the things that's lacking right now is people coming over to that side.
You need to use the mic.
Across the Stone Arch Bridge, really, unless they go to the Mill City, don't really have a place to go to get bite to eat. Where do you go to get something to drink? And certain new restaurants in there. So I think that would be a significant improvement. Thirdly, is the Fuji-Ya building. I thought a couple of years ago there were comments that after some study it was salvageable. Tonight it didn't sound like it was salvageable. I don't know if there's any comment on that.
Again, we went through the building with the structural engineer, and it would be, I think, it would be salvageable. It's not in danger of falling down or beyond putting back together. It would just be very expensive, and it's very limiting because of the big, thick bearing walls that it was built on. It's not very flexible, and it's on 6 different levels. So it's our opinion that you'd spend a lot of money on something that would be of limited use when you're all done with it. So it's not that it's inherently unsalvageable. I mean, if there really was a compelling reason to keep it and a use that fit into the sort of quirkiness of it, and there was enough money, it certainly could be put back into use.
I guess I was talking a little bit about the issue of the Lock Dam, and we don't know what's going to happen, but if it were to close, just think of the possibilities. Because look at that green path that goes right down here. And believe it now or not, right now there are federally maintained restrooms at the Lock Dam. And people forget about it, that there actually is that. If you go down there, you have this wonderful entrance under the bridge, which could be very dramatic. And that area is surrounded by the Stone Arch Bridge. And through that, there's a road that goes down to the water. There's really a lot there that we haven't really taken full advantage of. So if the lock and dam goes away, there will be some losses, but there is actually a great opportunity. It's got actually a viewing area, elevators, all kinds of things. So thank you.
Thanks. My name is Eric. I'm a River West resident, and I echo what was said back here too. We need to think about the intersection at 5th and 1st, but if there's one message that I have tonight, it's really to, regardless of what we do here, we really need to think about how to connect downtown and make it a better corridor and really attract people from downtown to this location. I would love to see something go in there that allows people to congregate, like a restaurant of some sort, or the mill rooms sound great, but I think if we really want to get people, we really need to advertise and make it easy for them to get downtown from steps down from 3rd Avenue, or maybe look at getting an easement on the parking lot behind and usher people underneath that bridge on 1st Avenue. Some way to get people from downtown to this location. That's my message.
Thank you. Question? Crazy idea, so don't throw things at me if you don't like the idea. I'm just throwing ideas out there. But what if just only in the summers on weekends we diverted the traffic off the parkway in front of the Fuji-Ya and made the riverfront area a farmer's market and music and a festival venue for just Saturdays and Sundays on weekends? Horrible idea? Good idea? You're possibly good.
Hi, this is Bill Bassett. I live in the city and just want to say that all of these ideas are phenomenal, and I think that's part of the excitement here. This is a spot that's waiting to just come alive, and I think it needs concessions. I think it needs music. It needs big ideas to make it happen. And so I just want to say, go big. We're doing the right thing.
Thanks, Bill. And then once we get all those, a nice ride station?
Maybe two.
Maybe two. All right.
If you've been around after or during the 4th of July or Aquatennial fireworks, parking is a real issue. And it'd be great to develop this, but we have to think about where we're going to put the cars or how we're going to shuttle people in and out too.
John Porter, I live in the neighborhood too. That site is really unique in a lot of ways because at the lower level you've got looked right out at the river. At the upper level you've got an entrance to downtown. And I think keeping in mind the Four Seasons, something enclosed that you can use all 4 seasons with nice views of the river on the riverside and not forgetting the First Street entrance to the river, so you're not having a blank wall or something that's not inviting towards the city side. Would be great. Public access to restrooms, something as a concessions area for eating and gathering. And I think the idea of the central headquarters and the role for that, for the park in general, is a great location for that.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'd like to remind President Irwin that from May through October, there's a farmer's market every Saturday right here. Now, Sunday might be a great idea. On another point by President Irwin earlier, on music down in this area, that would be a great idea. The original vision for Mill Ruins Park included an amphitheater down closer to the Guthrie, and I always thought that was a great vision. Food and restrooms is certainly a must in my life. Thanks.
Thanks. My name is Mark Zimmerman. I live in the neighborhood too. I also work at the university, and I'm sure it's been discussed for some part of the river project, but the university is looking to relocate the Bell Museum of Natural History. This could be a possible site for that could incorporate a lot of the things that people have talked about in terms of still redeveloping the tunnels and the canals and whatnot, but building on top of that site a Bell Museum of Natural History that could also provide space for restaurants and other things as well. So I don't know if you've talked to the university about that as a possibility, but it certainly might bring another part of the equation in.
Great, thank you. Others?
I just want to admit that I've always wanted to take a dive in that lock and dam, or skate on it, or skate on it.
Be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Anyone else? We're approaching our end session. One more.
Okay, I just wanted to say on the Bell Museum, one of our native members who just got some tobacco up on the last launch, shuttle launch, they're going to be part of the Bell Museum and having a native planetarium. And the plans are to build the Bell Museum on the west side of the Lowry Bridge.
All right. Thank you all very much. I want to talk a little bit about the next steps in this process. And Mary, if I miss anything, please jump up and add on. As we mentioned, this initial process or procedure is a very quick effort. And the idea is to get as many ideas, the thought of this, or the approach is to get as many ideas out on the table as possible and test those ideas. We're going to have one more community meeting as part of this effort, and it'll happen sometime February-ish, something like that, where we're going to ask all of you, probably in a bigger room, because we're going to need more room by that point, to come in and take a look at all of the concepts and the ideas on the wall and the feedback that we're getting from our finance consultants, HR&A, about those ideas, and get critique and thoughts from all of you. I'll mention again that with that, we're not going to refine through this process to a preferred approach. The idea is to let the concepts incubate for a time and really use the Central Riverfront Master Plan and combining the work that's done for the Waterworks study area with work that's going to be done for Main Street on the other side of the river, for possibility of the whitewater component on the other side of the river, for Father Hennepin Bluffs, for the head of the Hennepin Avenue Bridge on the downtown side, for all of those things to be taken in unison and looked at together before we begin the process with the community of refining down to those preferred approaches for this area as well as all the others. So I hope all of you will stay in touch with this project. I'm going to ask Mary to kind of highlight the website address in just a minute. Keep up with the website. Those of you who are here are going to get notice of the meeting in February, and it's going to be an exciting piece. Mary, could you just state the website, the project website on your...
Sure. For those of you who are interested, you can go actually to two websites. The one for the Minneapolis Parks Foundation is mplsparksfoundation.org, and it's actually at the bottom of most of your handouts. And then the other, of course, is the project page, the Waterworks project page for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, which is minneapolisparks.org as well. So, for instance, the minutes from these meetings